Hi and welcome to Custodian TV. I'm John Fitzgerald. Well, Reserve Bank have kept interest rates on hold for the 10th consecutive month. What does that mean? Well, it means for most part that Australia continues to be insulated from events overseas. But when you take a step back and look at it, isn't it just amazing that things that the IMF say and things that are happening in Greece and Europe are having an effect in Australia, whereas when you look at it reasonably and rationally, if any effect was going to take place, it was going to take place during the GFC. And it's really worthwhile recounting what happened during the GFC. The GFC was the banks running out of funds, essentially a global financial crisis. Banks ran out of money, but it showed that the Australian banks were not only resilient, they kept their rating as being 4 of the top 20 banks in the world. And still today, and Glenn Stevens, the Reserve Bank Governor, continually reaffirms that our banks are very solid and will easily be able to undertake any storm that could hit Australia. The long-term view of what's actually happening in Australia, to me, is most important. And even the IMF said just recently that Australia will return to accelerated growth next year. And remember, next year is only a few months away, 2012. And we've already seen job growth in New South Wales and Queensland in the last month. And this is very significant, particularly in Queensland, in southeast Queensland, which has been fairly heavily battered post the floods and the GFC. Queensland are in a position now where they need to employ 15,000 workers, but more important than that, the bill from clean-up after the floods has risen from $6-7 billion to $10.8 billion, with 122,000 houses having made insurance claims, and now the state government and federal government having to repair 9,500 kilometres of roads. What that means for Queensland is a major boom in 2012 and 2013 on the back of an employment surge. And in the next 2 years, and this is a really strong forecast, Queensland and Western Australia alone need to find nearly 300,000 workers. These are phenomenal numbers, really phenomenal numbers. And my view is to look ahead to that. And at the grassroots, it's already starting to filter through. Custodian had, in the month of September 2011, just gone, we had our best month ever from a house sales perspective. We provide investment housing. We've had so many new clients come into the Custodian program and old clients starting to now duplicate. They've seen minor equity growth or they've actually had income growth. And this correlates with what the Reserve Bank has been saying. They've kept interest rates on hold for those 9 consecutive months prior to last month, commenting that wage growth has now returned to levels seen prior to the GFC. So there's a lot of movement in the economy, and in real terms I'm going to talk about where the economy is going, particularly at the summits. There's some amazing changes going on in the landscape of the economy, and just quickly what's happening. Mining is creating so many new jobs, but it's also lifting up the other sectors of banking, finance and accounting, and that's why just in August alone New South Wales employment grew by 3,700 jobs. We've seen in the last 4 weeks banks come out and change their lending criteria. And you remember prior to the GFC they were doing 95, even 100% home loans. Post the GFC they came down to 80% loans on very tough valuations. Now all the banks have come back saying they'll do 90% and even 95 and 97% home loans. Now that changes the equation dramatically, and this has only just happened in the last 4 weeks. As custodians, I want to particularly and personally invite you to this year's summits in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne. It's also a very special summit for me because it's a celebration of 30 years now JLF Corporation has been in business. And believe you me, that does feel like a long time, but it's gone so quickly. So I'm sending you a personal invite in the mail to this year's summit, and I'd love you to come along and celebrate our 30 years, I actually have a special offer to those people attending the summit. So make sure you're there. I'm going to be covering all the topics, the real hot topics, and what I call the big four: China, the mining boom, our demographic shift, and the housing shortage, as well as talk about the specifics of equity growth and debt service ratios, being the change of the banking landscape. So I'd really like you to be a part of this year's summit. We've got some amazing guest speakers talking about really what's important. And what's important if you're going to be successful is repetition. So repetition is things that we practice on a daily basis, and that'll come down to our mindset. That's what sets us apart. We're also going to be talking about the ins and outs of housing and where there's going to be shortages and where there's actually going to be growth. And we're going to really hone in on that equity growth, but more importantly, where we're going over the next 1, 2, 3 years and how it's going to affect you, how it's going to affect your house prices, your wealth, but also your income, your serviceability and your borrowing capacity. You must be at this year's summits. Really important. And to get a glimpse of the summits, I've done some recording on the top four, I call it, being China, the mining boom, the housing shortage, and the population demographic shift. And you can click on the icons below if you'd like to view more about those things as a real tempter to what I'm going to be covering at the summits. Thank you for listening to me.